Welcome, everybody. It's Friday, January 19th, and we're here once again for MSP Confidential. We're coming to you live from beautiful, sunny Ottawa, Canada this week as I'm traveling. And I apologize in advance if some of the hotel internet proves to be challenging with some of the video stream, but hopefully it'll stay steady and we'll be able to get a good recording here for the stream. I have a wonderful guest today joining us, Mr. Carlson Choi of Cork. Carlson, how are you, man? Good to have you on the stream.
Hey, how are you doing? I think I might have beat you on the weather though, man. I'm in Southern California, Irvine. It is a cold day. We're in the 50s, so the winter clothes coming out. But I'm sure we'll all have a better location that we live in.
How lovely. It's minus 18 Celsius today in Ottawa, so
Oof.
definitely would rather be in the California weather, that's for sure. Well, folks, Carlson, is an illustrious SaaS vendor executive leading the charge over at Cork. Cork is advised and backed by some folks that a lot of people are familiar with: Austin McCord, Ryan Weeks, Rob Ray. And so thanks for being here, man. I know this cyber insurance topic, and I kind of labeled today's conversation something that you guys say on your
Yep,
website. I thought it was just very
yep,
catchy and grabby. And I kind of wanted to just literally dive into a bit of that topic, which is cyber insurance
yeah,
is broken. And so I thought
yep,
maybe I could get you to give me, from your perspective of being at Cork, and the many hundreds of conversations you have with MSPs, I'm sure.
yeah,
What is it that's broken about cyber insurance, and how did we get here, and what needs to change?
yeah,
And we'll navigate that
yeah.
as we go.
I mean, I tell you, man, I've been deep in, heads in, heads down with a lot of the team, a lot of the folks you mentioned, right? Our Avengers team from the old days, working and solving one problem, right? Fundamentally, when we took a look at cyber insurance in general, specifically MSP, I think, for us, there are a lot of things broken with it, but I think you can sum it up to kind of three things in our mind, right? One, if you think about it, is, the cyberspace is digital, right? Everything is a digital ecosystem, a lot of zero and ones, and it's changing on a daily basis. If you think about cyber insurance today, how do you underwrite the risk? It's a long survey form that most of us who in the MSP space, you don't even know what that form is asking. So what you're saying is analog piece of paper that is one snapshot of time every single year when the premium is due to underwrite a dynamic digital environment, right? That's problem number one.
Yeah, that's changing every day, by
Problem
the way. Like,
every
yeah,
day, every
yeah,
second that we look at, right? Problem number two for us, when you take a look at the fundamental issue after that policy, let's say, is written, even it's perfectly written for that one moment, in between the moment that is written to a year from now when the policy is due, they're doing nothing to help you or MSP or the end client to protect themselves and make the environment better, right? Fundamentally, that is a high risk for us. Third, I think this is why we're in a bit, we really believe in the MSP space. The MSP are left out of the equation, the economic equation in that case, where, you got to be a broker to sell this product. And every time something goes wrong, the MSP gets in the dead center of the attention, where they're being asked to look at, and they in no way have anybody is partnering with the MSP to deliver a better security, hygiene, and safer environment for their client. Because at the end,
mhm,
as MSP, right, many MSP, the thousand plus we spoke to, they're in the business to help their client, to make their client better, to build a long-term relationship. So I think that's really the missing piece of the equation of cyber insurance today. Yes, it's needed, but it's not really designed to help to make the environment better or to partner with the MSP for that. So,
yeah. It's kind of just a liability thing. It starts right from that very static form. You see,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
are you using this product? Because of a
Yep.
recent breach, they might literally call out
Yeah.
a product that they're not going to underwrite you if you're using.
Yeah.
And now they want to know: are you using these things? Are you doing these steps?
Yeah.
And sometimes, I find, and I just saw this in somebody's post on LinkedIn this week. Kyle Christensen posted about an MSP that has once again been breached, their cloud environment breached, all their customers sort of had an
Yep.
issue. Um, and in this case, this MSP didn't even have errors and emissions insurance, which
Yeah.
means they probably also didn't have any
Oh,
cyber liability insurance or anything else. And
yep.
so it's just heartbreaking, that the industry permitted that to be, even
Yeah,
possible, that an MSP is out there delivering this level of service in today's day and age without
yeah,
any kind of
right, right.
protection. So,
Yeah,
and I think you mentioned a couple things. One is uh, sort of this changing dynamic.
yeah,
Cybersecurity was maybe a little more static. The changes were not as
hmm,
obvious and or frequent. Um, and the 5 years to now, or even a little bit longer than that to now, is just constant evolution. Every
yeah,
day is a new threat, a new landscape, pretty much. And yeah, so I get the challenge with sort of the
yeah,
static policies and
yeah.
lack of coverage.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll add that this is quite interesting, right? Some of the statistics that we have used and we have seen is, every 39 seconds, somewhere around the world, a small medium business gets attacked, right? And a successful attack. You think about that frequency, that number will actually go down, right? With AI technology comes into play. These bad actors, they're not dumb. They're smart people, man. They're probably smart people that gone bad. They add AI in, that number gets shorter. And what's interesting is that you kind of pointed that out to that point is that these policy, carrier are not acknowledging that. They still say, fill out this form, MSP, get to do this. And to the other point, if you think about it, a lot of this plays in play, that tide is so crucial to find a way to make sure that not only to the point that the client's protected, like your point to say, the MSP also needs to be protected from that standpoint. And these policies by design is not, incentivized to do so. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to make this thing better, right? And the other point you actually pointed out was quite interesting, right? You talk about the technology stack. A lot of these policies that you see today will require to use a specific vendor technology stack. Use this particular EDR. You have to use this particular cloud service solution. But the reality is this, right? Those relationships today are purely built based on a business deal, right? Like or not, that's how business work. But there's no correlation why this tech stack should be in place on the other. Having lived in the MSP space for quite a while now, we know that every MSP has a flavor of RM they prefer, their EDR they prefer, right? Their cloud solution, their email security. Why? Because they have probably found the best of breed that works for their staff, but more important for their clientele, right? So why wouldn't you allow them to use what they currently have to make it work? But again, today's policy writer says, hey, if you work with this vendor, which we have business relationship with, you're going to be much safer. But in reality, it's not any safer because it's not something that's designed for their clientele.
Mm.
So that's kind of also another disconnect between the traditional financial policy and what they're trying to force you into from that standpoint, right?
Something that sticks out to me a little is also the role of the end client a bit,
Yeah,
because week after week, this seems to come up in different contexts, and now we're talking about it in the context of insurance, cyber insurance, or
yeah,
cyber warranty, which is I'll get into the choice of
yeah,
terms that you
yep,
guys have in a moment.
yep,
Um, but the clients have typically been very deferral based. It's like, hey, here's this thing that we got from our insurance broker. Here you go, MSP, fill this out for us,
yep,
often not concerned about whether any of the statements being made are
yeah,
true. It's just sort of a nuance or a something that's
yep.
in the way of them getting, the coverage they need to secure some business deal or what have you. And so that seems to obviously be shifting a bit. And I'm just curious what you hear about from MSPs in terms of, the customers really evolving to become
Yeah.
more participatory of that process themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear most of the time is that we got MSP partner that says, "Man, I got to fill out these forms every single day, right?" And these forms across the different client and carriers are different, so there's no standardized form, right? There's some of them ask you, what's your favorite fruit and what's your favorite firewall. There's no rhyme or reason why they ask you those questions, right? Because those survey is really designed in a way to say, if a claim happens. Oh, wait a minute, Luis, you didn't fill this box correctly. You like Apple, but we really are orange
Yeah.
provider. So therefore we can deny the claim. So it's quite
Claim
interesting. The
denied.
client kind of almost wanted to push off that liability to the MSP. And now I will tell you that there's a lot of MSPs starting to go, whoa, wait a minute. I don't think I want to sign that because my legal team said if something does go wrong, you take a look at all the claim denial out there today, over 50% of them has to do with this form was not filled out appropriately at the time, or you did not, you said you have this, but in our log, we show that you didn't have this. Or for that matter, it actually is a reason for them to increase rate. Then they really start, disconnecting or creating more friction between the client and MSP relationship. So we're seeing observing a lot of that. But I will say that those swarms is they're getting more and more those swarm coming in. But a lot of the MSP who are much more security aware say, wait a minute, it's not something that we want to be signing. So they actually tend to push back to the client, and then the client will go, well, then who's going to sign? So it's become a very awkward like piece. But at the end of the day, is a legal document that a carrier would, an insurance carrier would typically go back and say, hey, Luis, I thought you said you have this, but I didn't see it here. All right, you know what? I want to be a good carrier. Instead of 100% of the claim, I'll give you 50%. But ultimately, at the end, nobody's happy at the end of the process. So
Yeah.
it's starting to become that people are becoming aware that form is not just a form to fill out. It becomes a legal liability to some extent.
Back in November, I chatted with Brad Gross, who is a well-known attorney, MSP attorney that's
Yeah.
helped a lot of MSPs. He's very ubiquitous in the industry. He posts a lot and he talks about contracts. And I remember asking him this question of, how often does a cyber insurance underwriter, allow a policy change or a red
Yeah.
line of one of
Yeah.
their contracts or policies? Or how often does an MSP even consider, challenging
Yeah.
the way the policy is written? And
Yeah.
I honestly have never heard of anybody doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you have, and if people seem to have any success trying to push back on sort of the washing of the hands of the liability that the underwriters
Yeah.
are typically trying to do with the way they're written.
Yeah. No, I would say I would say I have, in our organization, part of it, actually put together, as well as kind of learn about the insurance space. We actually have actuary in our staff. And in that learning process, I asked a question. I go, why are these forms different? Right? It goes back to fundamental. Why are these forms different? Why are the policy different? It's because fundamentally, each one of the forms in the questionnaire that you filled out is tied to the way the clause, the terms and conditions written for that particular policy.
Mm,
Why? Because that's a way to say if you didn't fill this form correctly, is the algorithm to for denial, right? So when anybody try to push back to change the clause on a specific claim and coverage, they're pretty stiff. I've not heard of anybody successfully able to push it back because it ties to the survey form, ties to the entire ecosystem, it ties to the actuary science behind it, how they underwrite that risk. Those forms really much is for them to protect the risk. And by the way, I'm not advocating against it, but I think it is needed, right? But the magic behind it is the underwriting algorithm is forcing this is how it needs to be written. This is what the policy has
mm.
to look like. That's why you have very little success to be able to change that policy because the policy is a byproduct of the underwriting methodology. And that's why you lead to a very different policy for every single carrier.
Yeah, and I see this happen more and more these days, where MSPs establishing a vendor relationship are getting more detailed with the legality of the agreements
Yeah.
and what liability the vendors are specifically allowing
Mhm.
to exist through those terms and conditions and things like that. And I think it's all, a valid exercise in understanding
Mhm.
sort of where the liability sits and who's going to get
Mhm.
choked when something, happens.
Yeah.
Um, but definitely I see a lot of the vendors that MSPs want to work with sometimes are kind of interested in protecting the end
Yeah.
client as well. An
Yeah.
example of this is um, a, a company that resembles a fruit that I shall not name on a public live stream requires their associated consultants to have $3 million of errors and
Yep.
omissions coverage, for example. And sometimes that's a tall order. And, insurance
Yeah.
costs have been rising at a clip of 2x per year, almost, it
Yeah.
seems like, in the last few years. And so I'm curious about, these cyber insurance costs. Is the cyber insurance world, how are they, I guess, discussing the changing landscape and how are they adjusting their risks? You guys must have an
Yeah.
inside track on how this is thought
Yeah.
about and assessed.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't claim to be an expert in this space, but I think having a deep dive study of the insurance space is it's actually fairly simple if you put it in a, I put it in a human term, right? If you think about it, every year when let's just say, insurance company or, any company that underwrite a set of policy, right? What each of the client pays, what they call premium, okay? For every, let's say, dollar of premium, let's use $100. 100 is easier. For every $100 premium they collect, a percentage of that $100 has to be put in what they call loss reserve. And that loss reserve is really meant to say, based on all the premium collected, X percentage of these will be pay out because due to losses, claim, and payout, so that the money is there to pay for the policy when something goes
Yeah.
wrong, right? And that percentage for cyber insurance industry has been right in a range of 60%, which is pretty high for 60% premium. So 60%, $60 of every $100 premium they collect has to go in reserve that they can't touch the reserve for claims. Now, that number, in order for them to maintain that ratio to be 60%, really reflects clearly how well do they underwrite the risk, right? It goes back to the fundamental of that form. Is that form adequately underwriting the actual risk of this client, right? If it is, guess what? You're actually going to be able to lower that loss ratio and be able to lower your premium. But because as we go back to it, right, using a static form, underwriting a dynamic environment, every 39-second a new form of attack comes through, guess what? That form is no longer accurate. So the underwriting has actually got a huge gap of error. So year over year, it went from 60, 65% loss ratio, 75% loss ratio, said 80% loss ratio. Well, how do you bring the 80% back to 60? You raise a premium, right? You're now seeing, in fact, cyber insurance premium continues to rise year over year, doubling, tripling. Why? Because the underwriting fundamentally, that survey is not a good reflection of the cyber hygiene and the cyber environment of the client they have in place. So that's probably the best way to think about it. That loss ratio is what they're trying to control to manage a
Right.
profitability. Now, at some point, like if you think about it, I recently heard some insurance company, right, on not even underwriting. You can't even buy fire insurance in California. Why? Because other part of the world, the state, even other country like yourself. You guys got raining season, snow season. Well, California, we never rain. We rain 3 times a year, but we got fire season. For 2 weeks, we'll be on fire, right? Because the risk is so high for them to sell any more policy. Insurance companies said you can't even buy fire insurance for your house, which is kind of crazy. But because at the end they can't be profitable because that loss ratio got under control. So for us, that's why you're seeing a correlation. The result of raising premium of cyber insurance has to do with the fact that the underwriting is purely based on a static form for a dynamic digital environment.
Yeah. And this was, I appreciate you doing the deep dive, and it's fascinating stuff, and perhaps basic to a lot of people. But I know that I, just haven't spent much time thinking about how the insurance works. I just remember getting my renewal quotes every year and be like, "What the heck?" You know,
Yep,
another doubling in the price.
yep,
And our environment obviously is not changing much. We were a smaller, slow growth MSP, and so like it just I couldn't even justify paying 2x, but we had no choice. It was one of those necessary
mhm,
evils, which kind of brings me, I guess, to what Cork is trying to do, which I think is interesting. Now the first nuance, and I went and scoured the website, is you guys are
yep,
very particular about calling it cyber warranty, as
yep.
opposed to cyber insurance. So tell me how Cork is different than the traditional cyber insurance product as we know it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, look, insurance product, we are a form of financial coverage, right? If you think about any form of, let's call it insurance or warranty from that perspective, is when something happened, right? You're given financial coverage, a certain amount of dollar, right? Based on that in place. So, we are a form of, financial coverage. What the major differences is that on the insurance perspective, you are required to be a insurance agent and broker to resell that product. Okay. While on a warranty product, it's actually you don't need to be an agent and broker for that, but it typically is attached to a performance of a product, right? So I'll take an example. You talk about that fruit product company, right? We all have one of those mobile devices. when you purchase the hardware, right, the mobile devices, you can actually purchase a fruit care, right, to protect the any breakage of the glasses, right? If you drop the phone like I do on a frequent basis, it's really fruitful for me because at the end, right, I can go in and they replace the glass for X amount of dollar. It's a very specific type of damage to the performance environment. Now, that being said, if I cut my finger with a broken screen, I went to the hospital, get multiple stitches. Guess what? That is not covered under the warranty domain. That's where insurance kicks in. So if you think about that, that's kind of the easiest way to think about why we decide the warranty path versus insurance. Warranty path, the scope would be limited to the actual specific event related to the security environment. But what it does, you don't need to be a broker agent to resell this product. So in the case for a MSP, it becomes an MSP friendly product that they would be able to attach this cyber warranty with the cyber security services to their client. And for that matter, the opportunity is for them to be able to make a markup and make additional MRR in that. That's kind of how we thought about it. The problem we were trying to solve was create a financial coverage product that protect the environment from that standpoint for the MSP to sell. Now, the second element we've done very uniquely different. It's not just that it's a financial product, because you kind of heard about a little earlier, we're talking about the correlation between the success of financial product has to do with how accurate you're underwriting the environment, right? The way we've done it, there's a second component, which is probably the main cause of thinking about is attaching our platform to the existing security stack for the MSP of their choice, right? Is I call it, in our, it's funny, our deck, we call BYOSS, bring your own security stack. I tried to do a BYOB, but I couldn't find a word that I really think, but bring your own security stack, plug it right in. The connection takes less than 5 minutes. The environment is underwritten. We'll know right away X percentage of your clients available, right, to underwrite. Why is that important? Because now we can actually see the risk if they qualify. And then the third most important part, because we're now connected continuously during that term, when something does go wrong, we'll flip a switch to say, think of a check engine light on your car dashboard. Check engine light. Something is wrong. The MSP, go take a look. Check engine light. MFA is off somehow. Knucklehair decide to go turn that off. Now, as an MSP, you become more proactive on the specific thing that could potentially lead to an attack. So for us, the way we look at it, it's not just the right of boom after an attack happened as a financial coverage, but also the left of boom. But leaning in heavily on your current security stack, putting a security blanket around it, and bring out alert and signal that could potentially lead to a boom. So it's a really unique, approach. But meanwhile, still maintaining it as a warranty product, which MSP can sell without getting a brokerage license or bringing another partner in. Is a, that's kind of how we solve the problem. It's a different way of going
Yeah.
about it, but it's not, there's no perfect solution, but how we got into the lens is solving the biggest challenges and what's keeping the MSP up.
It's interesting that, I hadn't really thought of Cork as a effectively a security monitoring product in that context either, because it wasn't necessarily obvious to me that you raised the alarms, when something got inadvertently disabled, security defaults turned off,
Simple.
MFA got turned
Yeah.
off for a special need, and then somebody forgot to turn it back on.
Yeah.
Um, so that seems like a incredible amount of value that's added there just from the ability to detect
Yeah.
when things have changed and the environment is suddenly at risk. And so I guess this kind of introduces the what has been a problem in cyber insurance, which is lack
Yeah.
of standardization in the
Yep.
policies is now possible just simply by obviously the understanding, the deep understanding of the
Yep.
environment and how it's dynamically changing.
Yep.
Wow, yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say, we say, well, we don't think of it as a modern platform. And I would say we're not, right? We come down fundamentally, we're still a cyber warranty product
Yeah, yeah,
that MSP can sell. But we're incentivized for you to have a great environment. So that's why that monitoring aspect becomes so crucial for us. Because if we do that right, we're talking, we go back to the loss ratio before, right? If I only have you underwrite your environment once a year, right? I'm no different than any other insurance. I have not solved the problem with that loss ratio or that 60%. Well, but because now we're connected into your existing security environment that you as an MSP already know how to operate, your client has already adopted to it without any additional cost, guess what? I can actually signal those things to your point. What you mentioned about MFA inadvertently turn off because of, let's say, a special cases, that happen more often than less, and people forget about it. That's happened. That's what bad actor look for. We flip the switch on to let you know in place, but that correlation, we incentivize to make sure that as an MSP, you get that blocked before it becomes an event. That's how we control the loss ratio. It's not really through by denial claim. You didn't fill this form because that form is continuously being looked at. And that's why we have, other partnership with other, monitoring partners out there that, hey, how do we plug into your environment? As long as we get the right amount of information, we could be able to maintain that level of security. And even if something does happen, we have all the data that's needed very quickly to help the MSP to get back up and running for their client. That's kind of how we think from that mindset. And the standardization is rather than saying you have to use this EDR, this RMM, this backup, so BCDR backup solution, use what you already have. Why would you have to? It's almost like,
Hmm.
think about it. When you go buy a car, does your car insurance dictate, well, you know what, you have to have a four-wheel drive because you live in this zip code, and the color of your car must be red, even though you hate red, and it has to be three-seat, not a four-seater because of the zip code. Absolutely not. It's crazy. I'm gonna buy the car that I want, and you're gonna, right, let me buy the car insurance according to my risk of a driver. So if you think about that, right, it's kind of ludicrous that today cyber insurance say you have to have these technology solutions. No car insurance tell you what car you need to buy. You buy the car you want. So that's the approach we've taken, right? How do you use existing stack investment? And I think that I will, if anything, I've have a lot of conversation recently with cyber insurance folks thinking, talking about, wow, how are you guys doing differently? I actually push them. I go, isn't that kind of crazy? You demand the MSP or even the end client using a specific technology to get this underwriting. Is there any reason behind that? Well, that's a step forward to be more technology integrated. I said, that's crazy. They already got email. They already got backup. They already got, you know, EDR. Why would that change? You have the security. Why wouldn't you just? They're like, oh no, no, that's not technology. That's just. I go and they miss. I think they started to get it, but they're still really converging to go. Oh, the technology is the answer. So that's kind of how we're looking. So I think that standardization will come, but probably not based on you have to use all this. Probably you're gonna you might have standardization. You have to have some form of MFA, some form of backup, but not a specific vendor. But today is a specific vendor rather than a specific type security
So,
tool.
so this is interesting because tell me a little bit about how you think of what is the baseline, right? Because I think,
Yeah,
if you think of how cyber insurance companies do this,
yeah,
it's kind of like a cat and mouse game. Every year they maybe add more things to their static form because maybe that
yeah,
helps reduce a bit of the risk.
yeah,
Or in some cases it's generic. We
yeah,
expect you to have duty of care, and in a situation where there's a claim, if we find that you were not deploying reasonably expected commercial solutions to protect against that particular loss, then
yep,
suddenly, yeah, claim denied, right? And so it leaves it open to a
yep,
lot of, I guess, misinterpretation or just interpretation in the
yep,
favor of the insurance provider. And so tell me, it kind of just strikes me as, okay, well, if Cork says this client is covered, period, they're covered because it's already,
yep,
verified based on the stack
yep,
and the tools and things that are deploying in the client. but
yep.
but where is that baseline, and how are you guys thinking about the baseline?
I mean, you think about baseline, right? The way we all look at it, each one of the device within the client, they got to be somewhat being monitored, right? You can't have a disconnected device like without RMM of a sort. You're not be able to monitor that. To me, that's bare minimum, right? Then you got to have endpoint detection response, EDR. That's the to us. Those are fundamental. Without those, you're kind of dead in the water, right? I feel like those a
Yeah.
yeah, endpoint protection environment. Other things we look for, we've talked about multiple time, multi-factor authentication. I mean, it's like not having MFA on for people. I always ask them like, why? Well, it's too much of a hassle. I go, is it more hassle having the extra entry or having your account hijacked? I mean, it's a crazy question. I'm like,
that's
well, will
that's a
never happen
billion
to me.
dollar that's a literally $1 billion question, as it turns out.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's like, I would say my when I was in the corporate space before, we had our senior executives say, oh, there's too much work. Can we just turn it off? Next thing you know, they get popped. And it's like, it was a really expensive problem. When you think about it, those are the basic fundamentals of enforcing that. You got to look at things like email security, right? But to me, the one thing that always surprised me, backup. Like everyone think, oh yeah, yeah, everything's working fine. I got great solid state drive, everything works great. But backup is probably one of the things in my mind is becomes so crucial in the place because if something does happen, having backup will save your life. You will thank you for that, right? Especially think about in a ransom event,
Yeah.
your environment data being locked down, a backup can get you right back up and running versus having to go negotiate. So there's a lot of those baseline we look for and ask for. You have them. If you have them, prove the evidence or connect an environment to look at those in places. Now, the one that I always would push for and I think people are still, adopting is a security awareness training, right? The basic of teaching people not to click that email. All joking aside, we had, our intern in the company, over the summer got a text from me after the first week. Oh, this is Carlson stuck in a meeting. Can you go buy me a $300 gift card? Even happy for a security company like ours, right? But security awareness training, like it's amazing that people don't. And we think it's a common sense, but most people don't get it right now. Thank goodness my intern texted me and said, "Hey, this is not your number. Are you really needing that?" But not everybody is that aware, right? So for me, those are the
Yeah.
things. Four of the five that we talk about are very much technology driven. But the one last one is yes, it's technology enabled, but more awareness training for the employee. So this become more like, changing the culture, become more aware of these content. And as I said, these guys are getting more sophisticated. I'm getting daily email from my bank, supposedly, that looks identical, without you even looking at the email address and the reply to sometimes you can easily be misled in this. So those are the things that I think, we see as kind of the baseline. And if people said, I wish that people said, well, what if they don't have it? Then, honestly, I, we can't do business with this client. I just feel like that's put the risk back on us. And we're not doing our part to help the MSP and the client to have a safer, security hygiene. That's just yes, I'm turning away business, but that's not we want to be a good partner with the MSP so that they get a good client too, right?
Yeah. Well, along the lines of we sort of the attempt or goal of denying as many
Yeah.
claims as possible that cyber insurance providers have. I think this makes the whole environment just, people feel icky about it. Nobody likes
Yeah.
insurance. This is kind of, it just gives the whole thing a bad name. And so like these claims and dispute settlement issues are really a
Yeah.
challenge, I think, overall. And you hear this over and over and over again, whether it's a movie about, a company that was dumping poisonous
Yep.
stuff into the land and there's a class action suit. Like it seems that the number one goal is to not pay claims. So tell me,
Yep.
a bit of what the claim and settlement process
Yeah.
looks like inside of Cork.
Yeah, we approach it in a really different way, right? When we first started the journey, we spent a lot of time with a good couple dozen MSP asking where's the pain point. When the incident happened, right? What are some of the biggest challenges? The one thing they always say is 50% of what told us sometimes we don't get paid. Most of the time you get, hey, I thought that was covered my under my agreement, right? I thought, right? And they create a really big tension. And even within that is even if a claim gets paid, we're talking about 3 months, 6 months, and now we're like everything's moving more to a 9 months process. During that 9 months, there are time burns, time and material that MSP has to go pull log, work with a lawyer, work with a cyber insurance firm. Uh, but most importantly, what's crazy is somebody has to be the bank, right? Someone has to carry that open balance until the policy gets paid out. So we took all that as an input and say, okay, if we were to reinvent and change the way the claim policy worked, what would you want to look like? I remember one and she said, I don't like to be the bank, nor does the client. So if you can pay out right away, do that. And the claim
Right.
process should not be painful. It should be fun. It should be fast and quick. More importantly, at the end, when the claim process is completed, I would expect our policy premium stays the same. And I go, wow, that's like best of all world when it comes down to that, right? So we take a fast forward to now. We spend a lot of time thinking about how the process works. Essentially, we built a product now when and if a claim does happen, we have really interesting mechanism to help to solve things. One, we have a concept called instant fund access. The moment a claim gets made, an MSP and the client gets access to a small amount of fund so we can get things going, including can we build a parallel environment, run my backup so I can get back up to business while we're investigating or while the cyber insurance company investigating. Second is any claims that we manage without a cyber insurance partner in place, we pay within 30 days because we have all the data, we have all the information because we're connected to the environment. That's our goal in there. If a cyber insurance, policy is active in this client, we will be on the front end with the instant coverage. On the back end, as soon as their claim is closed, within days, we'll make the client whole. Third, probably the most important thing is we make it so simple and painless in this process so that when they come back, when the MSP say, oh, wow, this is so simple and fun, in that ultimately at the end, the policy uh, uh, um, premium, it doesn't increase. It stays the same.
Right.
Why? Because if you go back to it, this is a warranty product. Is wanting the performance of this security stack performing against what we said it's going to do. If it failed, it's going to do that. Like think about your favorite fruit devices, your fruit care that you bought. Every time you buy it, it's the same price, even no matter how many times you drop your glass, right? I mean,
Sure.
I'm probably the beneficiary of all those programs there, right? Every year when I get a new device, I at least claim it 2 times. Okay, so like because I got kids, I'm clumsy. But the next time I go back, they're not going to say, well, Carlson, because you dropped your glass twice, you're going to charge you the higher policy. No, it's just exactly the same. That's the approach we've taken. And it's been, honestly, there's been a lot of overwhelming response because we're just thinking about coming from the MSP perspective, the partners, how do we make them whole? How do we make their client whole? That's how we design what we have done at Cork. It's still something interesting and it makes a lot of the insurance carriers spoke with, they're like, wow, this is interesting. So you actually listen to your customer. I'm like, yeah, welcome to the world, right? It's like, but it's just how we approach it.
Yeah. Thank you for that detailed process explanation. It's really interesting. You hear a lot of this actually. The MSP might be doing everything right currently,
Yep.
and then the vendor that they're using to deliver a certain product has a security incident,
Yep.
and we've seen cases of the blame being assigned to the MSP um,
Hmm.
because they are the ones with the agreement with the end client and so on. And
Yep.
so, I guess this interesting challenge of the dependency on third-party vendors to
Yep.
be made whole to some extent. How are you guys thinking about this, the third-party dependency and assignment of
Yep.
liability and claims and responsibility and stuff like that?
Yeah, for us, we took a look at this, right? That this is the benefit of being able to kind of having our view into multiple vendors, right? And third party vendors seeing what's coming, seeing what's happening. A couple of things, right? Again, a lot of time is, for us, it's not about assigning whose fault. It's about getting ahead of it, right? If we see a certain type of pattern occurring with specific vendor, we will notify within our platform, the MSP. We've seen the combination of these two third-party vendor working together. There's some certain potential risk, right, that you should be thinking about. Go take a look at that. So the approach that we take is more about preventive mechanism than it is reactive to say the shifting the blame. When and if it crosses the line of the boom to the right of boom, it becomes our liability to make sure that people are whole. So we tend to be a lot more approach of how do we do the preventive mechanism than anything else. If it's really as a vendor system wide level, a lot of those this typically it will click right over. That's where insurance takes in, right? Insurance typically take a third party liability, brand damages, legal liability, which is not what warranty covers, right? And I think that's the kind of why it's a nice mechanism in place. This is why, for some reason, you need to be a broker to sell insurance because there's so many legal liability to go with it. Whereas warranty is warranting the performance of a specific type of services within that environment. So
Yeah.
make it simple and easy to sell for the MSP.
Now, do you think the industry is prepared, or does some of the regulatory and compliance bodies who often have requirements around insurance specifically. Maybe
Yep.
they call out insurance as a specific product. Is the industry set up to allow interchangeably the use of a cyber warranty, for example? And I guess the example that I'm
Yeah.
thinking of is when there is I don't know, some compliance framework that says, you have
Yeah.
liability insurance or whatever. Is warranty, a suitable swap in for that scenario, or is there a conversation that's required upstream with compliance regulators and so on?
No, so we are very involved in the compliance regulatory perspective, right? Because even a warranty product, especially what we're doing, we're still, we have a regulated body that we have to talk to regularly. It's really interesting. They've been bringing some of us in some of those conversations, a lot of which has to do with how do we get technology to better help us to assess the actual risk, right? It comes down to the magic of making sure the risk is correlated extremely well from that standpoint. If you kind of think about it from that standpoint, a lot of these folks, uh, they forget the fundamentals. The fundamentals coming down to the environment is continuously changing.
Mm,
And from the regulator perspective, they said, how do we put a regulation into an ever-changing environment, right? And they do notice that, like, for example, when you buy a car, you're required to buy car insurance, right? But the car insurance industry will be really mature. Their underwriting is truly based on your age, the car that you drive, right? And the prior, incident, pretty much give you a pretty quick convergence of how your premium, your risk is going to be. Now, you might see a little bit more like a newer policy where you have a mobile app that ties into your car, driving behavior and leads into the premium changes, right? But that's not going to affect that industry a whole lot because the environment doesn't change a whole lot. Car doesn't hasn't changed for many years. It has four wheels, multiple seats, gone from gas to electric, still drive the same. Driver is still driver. I still drive terrible, as my wife said. Gas, electric, it doesn't really matter. It drives like a maniac. It doesn't change a whole lot there. So that dynamic in my won't change a whole lot in premium. But in the cyberspace, it's massively important. Being able to understand the actual risk of the environment will be different. I'll take an example. If you were to change your even though you have a great security stack, the moment you unplug one and add one, you change out the firewall, you plug a new one in. Even down to the configuration, you can have the best firewall solution, but if you don't configure correctly, you have a high risk. So it's not an on and off. It's an on. Did you turn on the right switches, right? That's really where the regulator trying to figure out how do I make that static so that I can require everybody to carry a cyber insurance policy, right? But which policy? There's no standardization. So that's kind of a lot of the regulator compliance discussions going on. What is that standard and how do we standardize it so that it is not as dynamic as it is today? So I think that's probably you'll see probably in the next 3 years, you're going to see that lack of better term, standardization, probably more about how do you better underwrite the actual risk correlating the actual risk for the policy underwriting. And then when that happens, you're going to start seeing the requirement of you need to have this type of coverage. Now, then to answer your question too, is it swappable between a warranty and insurance? The answer is no. I mean, the warranties by design, right, is not meant to replace insurance, but it can complement it, right? If you look at a lot of small, medium business, 70% of
you
them
still
don't
have
carry
your
any form of
general
insurance.
liability, your
Yeah,
CGL, some
yeah,
of the things that
right.
you are required to
Now,
have, to even
yeah,
get a business permit in some cases,
yeah,
right? So
exactly. Yeah, we're not kind of replacement of that, but what we can do is help you to offset your costs, right? So what that means is now you can buy cyber liability insurance with a higher deductible, and then the warranty will fill in the gap, so you make your holes at zero. So what that does, it does your overall out of pocket is less, but then you're going to get a better coverage as a stack. So that's kind of how we by design, we have a way to design it to work with cyber insurance and work without cyber insurance because you're gonna want the best of both worlds. You kind of find an optimization between the two.
interesting. Now, I imagine at some point the traditional insurance vendors will start to feel the pinch or notice that somebody's eating their lunch
Yeah.
on this cyber stuff, and maybe start to do the same thing Um, but I wonder why they haven't already. If part of what they could be doing is better assessing
Yeah.
risk, through the similar mechanisms of understanding the stack.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on why the traditional insurance just hasn't done that already?
Yeah, I think they already started some of that journey, and they've been using what we call outside-in scanning, right? They do pen testing, security
Sure.
score,
Yeah.
uh, but it gets, you get a pretty good status of what it looks like from the outside. Now, how we took at it, we took a more inside-out approach, right? Through connecting through the existing security stack, I can see the key vital in the place. I always tell people this kind of interesting story, right? So imagine you get in a car accident, you sit on the side of the road, the emergency responder come up to you and say, "Hey, Carlson, you got to. I got enough time to fix two things. I know it's two diagnoses. One, you got a big gash on your head, and second, you got a major internal bleeding going on. But I can only fix one of them. Which one would you want to fix?" I'm like, fix your internal bleeding first, right? But the big gastric head don't show that without somebody diagnosed. So for us, that inside out view give you a true view of what that really looked like. Now, to answer the question, well, why aren't they doing that today? They are starting having that conversation, right? I think since we came to market, we have probably more conversation with insurance carrier as much as we have with MSP to this day, because they're starting to be curious. Like, well, how do you do this? Why do you think of it? Because the security score only gets you so much, and especially
Yeah.
when you're only doing that security score once a year. What happened between that 365 days? You don't see that. Also, so the mindset has to change significantly for them, but it takes time to change. And then the other thing to also know is interesting, right? Today, you might see insurance carrier partnering with a technology player, right? Both of them, the technology player might build some great SaaS technology platform for protection on the pre-attack, pre-event, or left of boom perspective. But they're incentivized for you buying the technology and they make money from that. They will say we will minimize the attack, but we can't say prevent all attack, right? When an attack happen, the business move over to the right of boom, the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier incentivize not to pay out or sell you premium and minimize the payout, right? So they are not aligned financially together. And in fact, most of these guys, neither one of them live on both sides of the boom of the equation. So when we designed what we had in place was that we have to be on both sides of the equation. The left of boom in order to minimize the attack to make everybody happy, because to have an attack. But doing that well to make sure what you're currently using, you're using the best of the ability, the best setting of the best firewall you have in place so that the right doesn't fire it off. So it's a really interesting dilemma we have in place, crossing both sides of the fence, but being able to kind of tie those two together. So the incentivizing for Cork is on both sides of the equation. The making sure your stack is performing its best and making sure that if you come to the other side, you financially cover and get yourself in and out within days, not months, and get right back in the business. Is a really interesting dynamic for us, because I've staffed that out both for the insurance space and the technology space. Um, Technology folks, they see an idea, they build it, they're rocking. My insurance
Mm.
guy was like, "Hey guys, the UV index is up by 0.1%. We shouldn't go out today." So like, imagine my staff meeting trying to make a decision, but this is kind of the balance we're trying to strike in in the way we think.
Mm. I was reminded this week when Robert Chaffee posted on LinkedIn because he was appearing in the Supreme Court in New York, I believe, on the case against the Ukrainian hacker that was part of
Yeah,
one of the vendor security incidents a little while back. And it was a stark reminder of the real damages I think that both MSPs and their clients
hmm
suffer in situations like this.
yeah,
But it was also interesting to hear a bit of his commentary on the two-way street conversation
yeah,
that exists with authorities. So I was curious to ask you about if there is any relationship with the authorities and how you guys help diffuse or the right of boom scenario, because I think in many of those cases the authorities do want to get involved.
yeah.
The FBI is very active investigating cyber criminality and stuff like that, and so curious on your comments about the authority side of this.
Yeah, I mean, the authority side is important, right? The right of boom for us, the moment something happened, like we do need to have, we have a judiciary service to kind of report them right to the right service. We do have folks that are on our advisory board that is tied into the the official government side of the equation. One thing we are learning a lot is that we do have contact within the the service where we're actually working a lot. They have actually a specific task force that focus on small medium business attack. In fact, a lot what's happening is that most of the time when you hear the news today is you won't hear the news until the attack is multi-million dollar, right? Because
Yeah.
majority of the authority involvement is at X amount of million dollar threshold. What's happening is that they recently formed a task force that's focused on small and medium business side. Because what you think about is a $5,000 attack, a $10,000 attack,
The same
$20,000
hackers, yeah,
attack.
that are hitting the big
Yeah,
ones.
that's
Yeah.
what they
So
do.
yeah.
So what's happening is that they have former authority that's focusing on. So we are in touch with those folks on a regular basis to say, okay, what are you learning? They are out there educating small and medium business, and we're also at the same time, how do we help them? Because at the end of the day, our goal is not to have the attack from happening. Right? That's the goal. How do you prevent it from happening? So there's a lot of great conversation happening, and they're learning because they realize it's not the bad actors actually. There's only few bad actors that go for the multi-million dollar attack, but there's a lot more going from the five dental offices get hijacked, ransom, 5 grand. I'm locking your data. 5 grand for a dental office, 2 days business. They're like, okay, you know what? Forget it. Here's your 5 grand. They do a lot of those 5 grand. So the reality is that there's a lot more of those going on that you don't see. And the authorities
Mm.
starting to realize, okay, we need to prevent that. And that aligns extremely well with our methodology and our target.
As I said the word hacker just now, I had a little voice on my shoulder reminding me of a post from Jason Slagle. He was annoyed that the hacker term is used almost exclusively in a negative
Yeah,
connotation. So,
yeah,
first of all, I want to apologize for using that term when referring actually to the term criminal, is what I should have said.
yeah, yeah,
um, because there are, it's interesting how much the hacker community
yeah,
is a
yeah,
key element of solving some of these
yeah,
challenges, right? And it's the white
yeah,
hats, the
yeah,
the people that are
yeah,
doing good for the society because they
yeah,
understand the same tools and systems and underscore of the OSs and
yeah,
the things that need to be looked at. And so you guys have some interesting folks on the advisory board.
yeah,
Tell me a little bit about how you're involved with the good hacker
yeah,
community to help mitigate some of these bigger
yeah.
challenges sort of at bay.
Yeah, to me, I think I always refer them as bad actor, right? Those are the bad guys, and then there's a good hacker who's really looking at solving it ahead of them.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're blessed to have guys like Ryan Weeks. I worked with him back in my last job at Datto. One of the probably best CISO that who actually have the MSP in mind. So when we first started this venture, one of the Avengers that we want to bring in was Ryan. I mean, I think Ryan knew everything that's needed, and he's really much involved in the community, right? As you know, he's also very deeply involved. Right, a boom, a lot of community in place. He's continuously tying in. I mean, I'm learning new things from every single day. Every time I talk to this guy, I'm like, man, really? I go, this is crazy that people. But then it's just, but he's so deeply involved with the good actor, right, of the community to continue to protect. So a lot of what he does, we make sure that gets incorporated in what we do. And along the way, not only the platform does this thing, but we're also helping to educate our MSP because I think part of the things I would say the first line of defense is our MSP community. I mean, they're facing the fire every single day. We want to make sure that not only the tools help them to get there, but also helping them to get there. I mean, for example, right, like uh, one of the partners recently had one of the clients have some question and incident, and they asked me, "Oh, what do we do?" I said, "Look, let me get you some help." And they
Mm.
get access to my CTO resource like Ryan. We help them to kind of figure out what's the best path forward and recommendation to prevent it further. That's not part of your typical cyber insurance, cyber warranty, whatever it
Of
is out
course.
there, or even monitoring platform, because those two are this tool set that helps you to prevent, helps you to remediate, but it does not necessarily give you the knowledge. So we're finding ourselves now a lot of times making sure that our front line of defense, our MSP partner, has the right knowledge to get ahead of it. So that's what we're also learning. It's quite interesting. So that's kind of how we tied in. We continue learning from the good actors to fight against a bad actor out there.
Wow. Who knew that we could go for a whole hour and be having a fascinating conversation about insurance
Yeah,
or cyber warranty?
one, two,
Man,
exactly.
yeah, right. I really want to thank you, first of all, for spending this time with me because it's been incredibly educational. I constantly repeat how selfish I've been with MSP Confidential because mostly I bring in people that I want to learn from that I find are doing some interesting work out there. And so thanks for coming on and sharing a bit of
Oh,
your journey with Cork and what Cork
yeah,
is doing. I
yeah,
think it is something that needs to change. It's not a process that I've enjoyed having to go through. I was lucky as an MSP. I never had a
yeah,
security incident, and I knock on wood, honestly, because it could happen to the best of
yeah,
us in
yeah,
the least
yep,
expected moment. And so I love that you guys are spending some time also building inside of a community, obviously, that cares very much about this. And
yeah,
so kudos to you guys and the work that you're doing with Cork.
yeah,
Well, folks, we're kind of at the top of the hour.
yeah,
You can find Carlson on LinkedIn. Of course, with your permission, I'll post your LinkedIn
yeah,
in the show description later on.
yeah,
Feel free to reach out to him or the team at Cork if you'd like to learn more about what they're doing or about the insurance process.
yeah,
Again, I think
yeah,
the more MSPs that get involved to understand how all this works and how we can help each other,
yeah,
I think the more we can drive this need forward, which is really the challenge.
yeah.
We don't want this to be spread out over 15 or 20
No,
years. We kind of want to help the industry evolve a little more quickly so that
that's right.
we're all protecting clients better, right?
Yeah, no, and if anybody's want to talk more about it, I can talk for days and hours on this topic, right? But ultimately, at the end, feel free to DM me directly, make a personal connection. I'm always there and available. So,
That's awesome. All right, Carlson. Well, once again, thank you so much.
thank you.
Everybody listening in, thank you so much. We're here every Friday for MSP Confidential at 12 noon, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you next week. Until then, have a wonderful weekend, and thanks again.